is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it? I'm the Doctor. Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
Small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Alright dudes, it's time for another episode of It's Time to Rewind. I am known as Bubbawheat, not the Bubbawheat, not first name Bubba, last name Wheat, just Bubbawheat. This season is Red Who, where I'm covering British sci-fi like Red Dwarf and Doctor Who, and joining me 3 million years in the future via the TARDIS is my guest, Rob Walker. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Smegging great, man.
Absolutely. I am really excited to get into today's episode because I feel like this is definitely one of the greats, and we are going to be talking about Better Than Life, which is the second episode of Series 2 of Red Dwarf, originally released on September 13th, 1988. But before we jump into today's episode, how did you discover Red Dwarf? Because I know you're an American like me, and my guests have been my guests are going to be about 50-50 splits, roughly, between Brits and Americans, and I feel like it was definitely harder to find in America.
So it's generally been, basically what I found is almost everybody I've met is like me, where if you're about my age, I'm like 44, your odds are you saw it on PBS.
Right.
That's how I saw it. It was running on PBS. I want to say I saw it like 92, 93. And the reason for that is when we had moved to Seattle. We didn't have cable there. It was too rural. So all we had was the antenna. So that left us with like 7 stations to watch. So we actually watched a lot more PBS because sadly Fox, which is what I would have watched as like a kid back then, would come in really, really grainy. It was like trying to watch Skinamax or something, if you didn't have access to it. You had all the snow and you were just squinting and like, what is this? So we saw, God, I want to say they were running season 5. They were doing that in Blackadder. It's also how I discovered Blackadder. And they were running season 5, and we saw, what was that episode called? Quarantine. It was the one with Rimmer in a checkered
Mr.
gingham
Flibble,
dress.
yeah.
Yeah, and Mr. Flibble. And I just remember my brother and I, my dad, like we all just lost our shit. We're just like, what is this? Like, it was very funny. And because of that, whenever they would run it during their pledge drives a lot, because it was really popular for the local station there. So whenever they would do their pledge drives, like we would watch to kind of catch up with the show. And then slowly, basically, like we had recorded them on VHS. And slowly as they started coming out on DVD, we would collect them that way. So, but yeah, you can blame PBS. Most people I know, it's just like in America, it was like, well, PBS, or they had a friend who had PBS, or they had a friend who had gotten the DVDs.
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit on the first episode this season, but yeah, that was me as well. Although we did have cable in the 90s, so it was mostly like whenever I go to a relative's house that didn't have cable, and I was left alone to wrangle the TV, and they only had the 4 or 5 stations, and that's whenever I would find like Red Dwarf or Doctor Who.
Please tell me you had grandparents with a giant wooden Zenith TV set that also doubled as like a coffee table.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
But yeah, this, and I guess once again, before we jump into this episode, this is Series 2. We can talk just a little bit about Series 2 as a whole. Like, this is 1 and 2, I think, are very similar, and they're very different from the later series. As it is much more focused on just the ship, and this episode is one of the first ones where they really step out of the ship very much and get to do something different as in this total immersion video game.
Yeah, you kind of needed. It is funny. I have I don't want to say love-hate relationship because I love the first two seasons. There is like a give and take of like, I do really appreciate the loneliness of space they capture, the submarine like color scheme with just this gray steel. That sort of loneliness of it. It was
military gray versus machine gray.
Yeah, versus machine gray. And it was a really like interesting show to watch. Like I would end up watching it like late at night because I was in high school at the time, and teenagers stay up really, really late. So sometimes I would watch episodes really late at night, and it was really like good for that because it was kind of like lonely and quiet. It's the kind of thing that you watch at like 1 a.m. But I will say there is like on the flip side, there is a kind of drabness to it where it's like, you needed like an updated color scheme, some better sets.
They did their best with a giant inflatable banana on the wall.
Yeah. And like personally, seasons 1 and 2 have really strong story moments. And I do really like them because it is one aspect of Red Dwarf. Probably my favorite aspects of Red Dwarf are seasons like 3 through 5. Where I thought like it was still on board the ship proper, but like it had more color schemes that the stories could branch out a bit. The effects were a little better. And then after 5, I'd say that's when I never found the show bad necessarily, but it definitely like lost its original vision and became something else. Like at some point, the entire crew come back, Kachansky comes back, and I'm like, well, these were all the focus of the early seasons, like getting back to Kachansky and this and that. And it's like, well, now you gave him the goal. So, it's a different version, And I'm like, it still doesn't feel quite right. And I know Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, like they had split as well. And I noticed that some of the differences for me happen kind of around that split. And I'm not saying like one's a better writer or the other. I do think there was something though, when the two worked together, it clicked in a certain way. Whereas when they're working individually,
they balance each other out.
Absolutely. So, seasons 1 and 2, like really strong. I enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah, and I'll get to them eventually, but I feel like I'm kind of in the minority with Red Dwarf because I enjoy Kachansky. I didn't enjoy series 8, and I feel like I'm one of the only people that liked Back to Earth, and I thought
was that the movie?
Yeah, that was the first movie.
Yeah, I love the idea, hated the ending. That was my biggest gripe about it was that like I was loving it so much and then the ending was a cop out. So that was my thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and jump into the episode proper, Better Than Life. This was one that I picked from this series because I figured it was the best one. They didn't really have any kind of timey-wimey episodes this series, but I feel like Better Than Life is definitely the highlight of this series.
Well, and if you want timey-wimey, like later we can talk about the book because that gets very timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly all over the place.
Oh, so you have read the books? I know.
Yeah, I've read the book Better Than Life, which is amazing. I think it was the best of those books, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I didn't even realize that there were books until prepping for this and starting to listen to other podcasts about Red Dwarf and finding out that there are also those 4 novels. Like I think 2 of them were written by collaboratively, and then they each wrote one on their own. Like
and I think it was backwards. I think the one written by Rob Grant was a direct sequel to the Better Than Life book, and I do think I like that one better. Though Doug Naylor's book is good too. So they're both decent writers alone. Even I just think like for some reason, just when they work together, it was like, damn,
yeah,
magic.
And one of the one of the other big changes besides all the the colorful decorations in the bunks is we get a non-pixelated Holly. We get a nice clear vision of why am I blanking on his name?
Was it Lovett? It was Lovett. Okay, Norman Lovett.
Norman
I was
Lovett.
forgetting his
Right.
first name. Yeah, Norman Lovett. Yeah, it's so funny. I like both Hollies. I really do. I like Hattie Hayridge. I might like Norman a little better because of the deadpan, but like I don't know, Hattie Hayridge like really sold that kind of like strawberry blonde, kind of like zany, not quite all there.
Yeah. Female Holly was definitely ditzier, and Norman Holly was very, like you said, deadpan, but also, I feel like he's a bit more of a prankster than Hattie's was. Hattie was more bumbling.
Oh yeah, the practical joke where he claimed Lister owed like $6 billion or something because he left a light on, and that the entire Earth was covered with one of his sausages that had grown beyond like all imagining. And then he's like, "Oh my God, are you serious?" He's like, "No, April Fools." He's like, "It's not April." Yeah, but you couldn't sit on a jape like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the ending of Queeg is, just
God,
one of the best moments.
My brother and I, like, when we do something for each other, I'll always end it with, and remember, the moral of the story is be grateful for what you've got because I'm fantastic.
Yeah, well, again, trying to jump back into this episode, it's always interesting that so many of Red Dwarf's episodes, the meat of the episode is like almost entirely contained in like the last half of the episode, and the first episode is completely separate plots where it's just like mainly the two of them talking about some random thing, and this time it's about Rimmer trying to cook with the Scudders.
Where's the cat? Sleeping off the stomach pump.
Yeah, and this has one of the great lines, dumplings, proper dumplings should not bounce.
Dumplings. Real dumplings, Rimmer, should not bounce. Yeah, no, that scene's just classic. Well, and Lister, like, looking at the dosage, it's like for extreme upset, like 2 tablespoons, he just, like, pours the whole thing in his cup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely feels like a classic sitcom setup, too.
Yeah, that part I like. The part I still don't quite understand is the joke about the Scudders liking John Wayne movies. I'm just like, yeah, that felt like they needed a filler joke or something. I'm like, I don't know where that was going. I don't think it ever came up again.
No, well, I mean, I think that was just for the payoff that comes up like literally right after the scene with the two of them going by with the cap gun and the cowboy and Indian costumes, which I love that. I feel like that, that was worth 2 lines.
It's funny because watching it again on DVD, like, I notice now, like, non-digital Holly is nice, but now I can see his black turtleneck. I may need to adjust the color on my TV set. I'm like, maybe this is too bright. But the other thing is, like, the cheapness of it, there's definitely, like, the early episodes, there's definitely a charm, and it reminds me very much of MST3K, which I'm trying to think, like, I think they started actually maybe concurrently. But, like, the Scudders in particular remind me have, like, an MST3K vibe. And then the background of, like, that bridge and the cheapness of it, I'm just like, yeah, I really want to see, like, Joel and the bots, sitting here talking about movies. Yeah, right?
Yeah, and it definitely, I definitely see what you're saying, because it feels like Joel Hodgson could have been the designer of the Scudders, because they do have that almost cobbled together look to them. But I always think it's so incredible that this show was able to imbue so much personality to the Scudders. Like they were always one of my favorite parts of the show, even though they kind of barely showed up, and they were mostly disappeared after just a few series, which is kind of a shame.
I want to say, maybe season 3 was the last time I saw them. Maybe they were in season 4. I'd have to like watch them all again back to back. But yeah, I did miss them. I do think I think part of it was they're probably a pain to kind of
they never worked.
Harangue. Yeah. And then just also like, I think there's only so many jokes you can do with them because they're very it's just a hand. So it's a moving hand. And then plus once you got Crichton into it, it's just like, well, anything the Scudders would do, Crichton would now do. And he can talk. So it was a trade-up.
I've heard that a lot. And also that Crichton was kind of the reason why Holly mostly faded away after Crichton showed up, because Crichton was the exposition machine that could travel with them and be on screen rather than just a face on the screen delivering exposition.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, but I'm like the seasons 3, 4, 5, like Holly was still there, and I thought she was still very funny. I think it was season 6 where they ditched her entirely, and that's where I'm just like, yeah, this suffers. like there is something that Holly still added, even if Crichton was taking the bulk of the exposition. Like she still always had some funny lines and some good moments.
Yeah, and I really love Norman Lovett, and as much as I'm disappointed that they haven't been able to fit in Hattie, and maybe they will on the newest reboots the newest series that they're planning, which it seems like they're not doing another 6-episode series. They're doing another mini series, which I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a shame, because even though I did like Back to Earth, I liked the standard format later seasons better than Back to Earth, or even the Promised Land, which I wasn't too big on the Promised Land either.
Yeah, the later seasons just. The funny thing is, I now have a slight nostalgia for seasons 7 and 8. 8 in particular, when they brought the ship back and had Kachansky there and the entire crew, and Graham McTavish as the insane warden. But yeah, after that, I just was not as into it. And I think some of it is the natural aging process and a show that's kind of just lost what it was kind of originally about. It's not that I hate it. It's always just like, well, the episode is still good enough, generally speaking, but it's definitely is not what it once was. So I'm having trouble even keeping up nowadays, also because of the hiatuses, or hiatus-I, or ease, or whatever you call them. They
have 3 to 5 years or more between.
So I always
episodes.
find out a year after the most recent one came out. I'm just like, oh god, there's another one. I had just forgotten about it. I don't know, but I mean, I guess if people are still watching, I'll never say no to Red Dwarf. That's for sure.
Yeah, I did the first 6 series whenever they came out on DVD, and then I just did a full rewatch into New Watch last fall, where I was mostly new to series 7 and 8, and of course all the newer stuff.
7 got a little rough. I didn't like whiny Crichton, but 8 I'll say it's not what the vision of the show should ever really been, but I will say I thought it was funnier. I think everybody bounced off each other really, really well. And the ending to that one with Rimmer, perhaps going to the great beyond, and his solution was just great.
Yeah. And then again, it's so easy to to bounce off of like all the
Sorry,
other
let's
seasons.
let's just talk about Better Than Life. I just love the show, so.
Yeah, so do I, and it's just so easy to want to talk about the show as a whole and not just focus on one episode, because I feel like this is one of those shows where each individual episode has so many different things in it that it is kind of harder to talk about, a one, because it's not so much about the story, it's about the various gags, and each episode, there's a handful of like standout ones, but a lot of them is just like, oh, this is where that gag comes from, and then the series as a whole, you remember all the good gags.
Yeah, though I will say this, like, so this one was interesting because watching again for the first time in a while, I realized, like, wow, this has like a complicated structure, because like Act One is Rimmer and Lister talking about the fact that Rimmer's dad had died, and all of Rimmer's baggage being unpacked. And then you have the reveal of what Better Than Life is, and Rimmer decides to go in there. And then you have like this whole section of them just dicking around in the game. And that doesn't even start till like the very middle of the episode.
Yeah.
Like I had forgotten how much buildup there was to it. And then the third act being the downfall where the game turns against Rimmer. And then the fake out ending and everything. Like I was like, yeah, there's a ton of stuff in this episode. And I always remember it when I saw it, like when I was like 12, as being about, oh, the game Better Than Life. I realized like that's only like 50% of this episode.
Yeah. And they even they set it up in the first 5 minutes, because that's like one of the first things they open in the mail pod. It's like, oh, it's this virtual reality, and
it's like Brooke Shields' buttocks.
Yeah, it's like these are so hard to find. Okay, let's put it down and forget about it for the next 10 minutes, and then instead let's have this conversation with Gordon, who has an IQ of 8,000, so that's 2,000 higher than Holly, and this Gordon moment is so great with the chess.
Pawn to King 3. Oh, hey, he's a sly one. Well, who's winning? He is really. That was the first move.
It's just got such a great setup, and
Brilliant
even
writing.
Yeah, and the actor is so great that plays him at the end whenever he's looking around. And he's like, how do you switch the thing off?
Yeah, no, the
And even like that, it's my move is pawn, and that's the little knobbly ones down in the front too. Just that little extra, and and it's something that's let's see, Quig is this series, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice that it comes, the chess comes back with the end of Quig.
Even the throwaway jokes, like this has one of my favorite jokes ever in anything, and it's the newscaster reading about a missing page of the Bible has been found. It's been carbon dated and reads, "To my darling Candy, all persons in this are entirely fictitious. Any similarities to people living or dead, and then it's been condemned by church leaders." And I just like that still kills me whenever I see a Bible in the store. I just want to open it and see on the first page, "To my darling Candy."
Yeah, and that's another callback. Like this is the first time that we get to see Groovy Channel 27 with the hologram newscaster too.
Yeah,
because that's I love that they brought that back, because that was a gag that they just spoke about in the first series, and then we actually get to see it here this time around.
No, yeah, there was like definitely more of a connection, I feel, between seasons 1 and 2, where like it definitely felt much more like the same universe, whereas the next set of seasons feel like it's slightly in a different universe. But yeah, I always like those callbacks. Some continuity, not much, about the same as Doctor Who, but I think the big joke was always like, why does Lister have his appendix out twice? Yeah. I remember Robert Llewellyn in some like behind the scenes thing, reading the fan mail about it, and he's like, well, the answer is obvious. He enjoyed having it out so much the first time, and he decided to do it again.
Yeah, and I think there's the canonical one, which I believe they put in one of the novels, that he has a rare condition where he has 2 appendices.
I love that because it's just like, fine, you all gonna complain about that? We'll come up with a reason. I just like the idea of a vestigial organ. But
And they also have, I mean, they could also explain it away with the multiple timelines because like with the white hole, that's kind of another continuity thing because at the end of White Hole, then that version of those characters never existed. But
well,
then Lister
and
references it a few series later.
And the funny thing is, the white hole in the Better Than Life book plays a major part. They incorporated that episode into the book because the book is mostly Better Than Life, which is season 2, and then a lot of season 3 stuff. And maybe I forget when I think White Hole was season 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that
White Hole is series 4.
Okay, that was series 4. Okay.
Because the next episode I'm doing is backwards from series 3.
That also plays into the Better Than Life book. It was a combo of like Better Than Life and then stuff from series 3 and 4. But the thing I like about Better Than Life is the funny thing is I was finding out that it wasn't a universally loved episode when it first aired. It wasn't watched as highly as some of the other ones, and a lot of people were just like never listed as kind of their favorites. But the revolutionary thing it did is that it gave Rimmer an actual backstory and a kind of reason behind his various neuroses, which I always say, like, people's baggage doesn't excuse their behavior. It does help explain it a bit, though. Where it's just like, okay, at some point you have to take personal responsibility. But it's like, I could see how if you don't take personal responsibility, this stuff can mess you up, but if you just let it swallow you up, And that's always the case with what happened with Rimmer. And, like, it was the first time that, like, I really had, like, a lot of empathy for the character. Because I don't think they had explored that much before this episode. You got little bits and pieces, but this one was like very Rimmer-centric, and it was also like
very sympathetic towards Rimmer because most of the previous episodes is Rimmer being a prat, but it's just because he's a prat and a smeghead.
Well, and you could see like it was one of the few times where like Lister and Rimmer actually have like a few moments. Where it's not just based entirely on animosity. Like Lister is, I think, trying to understand Rimmer a little more, and like I think kind of gets it. Where it's like, well, he's never gonna like Rimmer, and he's always gonna think he's a total smeghead. But and he's like, I can kind of see where he's coming from a bit. Like this obviously messed him up.
And we get this, and there's also these nice little, a mix. It's like a mix of they mix the comedy, the empathy, and the sci-fi concepts really well in this moment. Like, we have to talk about Lister reading the letter, which there's so much going on in just this one little moment with...
Well, of course he's dad. I mean, who else would he be?
Well, I mean, even before that, like, starting off with the Rear Admiral...
oh, yeah. It's embarrassing. I should be gone Emperor of the Universe by now.
Yeah, and then it's like, I hope this epistle finds you well. Are you sure I should be reading this such a personal information?
Yeah. Just go on.
And then, it's, I regret to inform you that your father is dead. Well, of course he's dead.
Dead. My father's dead. Oh,
that's
dead.
an E.
Yeah. And then he just looks like, oh.
And then it's
so
like
sorry.
There's a beat. It's like, oh, A.
Oh, and all it says is he died peacefully in his Jeep of sleep.
Yeah, and that's a great moment of waiting for the laughter to like it's the delay is perfect, but also like the fact that the delay is longer because he had to wait for the laughter to die down too.
Yeah, no, I do miss like it's so funny watching this nowadays because laugh tracks are such an archaic thing of the past. And to be honest, for the most part, I actually really don't miss them. Like I didn't realize how awkward they really did make sitcoms. But there is something, particularly if you've got a live audience, Because a lot of times it's just a laugh track, but the early episodes when they had a live audience, there is something infectious about like the laughter, particularly if it's a really like laugh out loud funny moment where you can tell they're not faking it, they're really just like losing their shit. I always think of the one where Rimmer walks in and it looks like Crichton's just like bonking Lister or something, like with the vacuum attachment, and you can just hear the audience like howling. It's like, boy, you'll bonk anything, won't you, Misty? Like it just everybody's losing it. So yeah, I do kind of miss that a bit, but at the same time, there are moments where I'm just like, boy, yeah, the laughter is like strangely kind of intrusive. Like I'm not sure I miss laugh tracks that much, or live studio audience, but there's occasional moments like that are really good. Yeah.
And then we also get this, this is the only series where they had the observation bubble, for all the quiet, somber moments. And we have
which
this.
I like, and Howard Goodall's like the weird little synth music up there. I'm like, it does, those first 2 seasons really do have this very lonely in space vibe, which again, like, is probably why I end up watching a lot of these early episodes like late at night. Just feels good to watch like in the middle of the night.
Yeah, it's always interesting, and especially these first 2 series, the opening credits. It is this like slow, somber orchestral. It's like
2001 music and the organ, like.
And it really sets up the loneliness of space. And you like, if you just turn this on, you wouldn't think it was a comedy right away.
No, you really wouldn't. You're like, what the hell is this? And then, like, probably instantly you'd figure it out once you hear the laugh track. But yeah, so no, those moments are really great. And of course, I love, like, this episode's very psychological, which I like. It's a very big psychological insight into Rimmer, but also just the basics of like how the cat operates. And trying to cheer up Rimmer.
Like
I know it's sad.
I referred to the cat in the last episode, and I kind of love it, especially in these early series, that he's just an agent of chaos and like practically a cartoon character.
Oh, absolutely. But that's it. He's a real cat. And the first 2 seasons in particular, they really played up that he's like a real cat. Whereas like he became a little more of just this caricature later. But in the first few seasons, like they have him doing catty things. And I love him trying to cheer like Rimmer up and just like, look, I know you're all sad and upset, but keep in mind, it's party time for little worms. Just the look that Rimmer gives him. And then just like the cat walks up and he's like, there's no consoling him. What's such a cat thing? Like, it's like, I don't care. And when he like imagines like, this isn't my fantasy later, and he's like, no, but it's mine. It's just like the cat is always in it for himself. Pure selfishness.
And the timing and the setup on that is so perfect, with him just like popping his head into the view, like from the side, like he's just literally popping up out of nowhere, and then his hand comes in and grabs the cigar out of his hand.
Yeah, yoink.
But I did want to mention, a couple moments back in the observation bubble, like we get this nice back and forth with Lister really trying to connect to Rimmer, talking about how he was whenever his dad had died. And again, we get that great comedy of, he thought that he was just around the U-bend, and that he kept tossing food and magazines down there. Yeah. And then we get this great philosophical moment too, like after he's that, where Rimmer says, I mean, I knew he was dead. I mean, they're all dead, aren't they? Just referencing the fact that they're 3 million years in the future. But the fact that he got it felt like it happened just yesterday.
Yeah, there's a finality to it when you hear it like that. Because it doesn't feel real until you get a letter like that, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh, like there's a finality to this. Like I really got that, where it's just like, yeah, no, I mean technically you're 3 million years in it, but like when you get it sent to you, then it hits you just like, oh, I still like pretty much was around 3 million years ago when he would have died. Like, it's not like, oh, this happened 20 years in the future after, like, we had gotten sucked into deep space. So I get that feeling from him. And also that, like, because I've seen that so many times. Again, I thought this episode was very psychological, which is why I like it.
Mm-hmm.
But also very funny about...
Yeah, and the great kind of zoom in fake out whenever he is, talking.
I hated him.
Yes, that's another just fantastic moment. Like, such a great fake out. It's kind of watching it again. It loses just a little bit of the impact because at this point, like, we know how much we know, like, as viewers, about Rimmer's relationship with his father, but that's still just such a great moment and a great fake out.
If you watch it chronologically, like, it's a great little shocker. Like, no, I hated him. Like, all that buildup for that. I like that insight because I really get that. I've seen that happen with people I know where it's just like their parents were awful. Just awful, but when they die, it's still like it brings up all these complicated emotions. It's just like, well, they're still my parent, and it's still upsetting, and in many cases, it's like I never got to hash it out or resolve things, or now there's no chance. Like, so I get like why Rimmer's upset by all this. And again, it's a character that is so easy to just kind of written as like, oh, he's the perpetual jerk. And instead they give him like all of this baggage and backstory, which informs the rest of the episode and leads to like the best payoff. But yeah, no, it's that whole scene I think is just absolutely brilliant. And then they get into the game and it becomes kind of a different episode, but definitely like a little more fun after kind of the drudgery.
Yeah, and I do like that the impetus for Rimmer finally going into playing the game is that news broadcast that he's watching from Groovy Channel 27 where they talk about it, and it's like they mention that all your fantasies can come true, and then he runs in there. And I also think it's very telling, the different personalities based on their fantasies, which I am a little bit more surprised that, like, Kat is presented so much about being, after a female and like wanting to have sex, but then whenever he's actually in this Better Than Life game, he's not interested in actually having sex. He just wants women to want him.
I mean, it does seem cat-like. I wonder how much of that was, are you actually going to show him bonking anybody? Like, so I don't know, but I'm like that. There is like an almost Pepe Le Pew kind of thing about it, where it's just like, well, once you get the girl, just like, now what? Like the dog chasing the mailman. I mean, well, the other thing we have to remember is that unlike a real cat, in the wild, he's, I would argue, I guess, domesticated, but more importantly, I don't think he's had any female interaction because he was like the last of his kind, along with the other old dude.
Yeah.
They had all left.
And later on, they kind of, not so much retcon, but they kind of explain that the reason that he was left behind is because he's an idiot.
Yeah, so he's an idiot, and he was left behind, so he probably hasn't had much interaction with the female of his species. So I guess it kind of makes sense, where he's like, I don't even know if he would know, like, is his instinct hard enough where he would know how to do that he would know how to do it even? Who the hell knows? But yeah, it's an interesting observation. The what was it? The mermaid, the fish at the top. Stupid way around, I like it this way.
Yeah, and Lister's fantasies basically all revolve around food and the motorcycle, which and
so the funny thing about this episode is once you read the Better Than Life book, that explores it much more. The biggest weakness in this episode, I feel, is that Lister's fantasy is so shallow. There's no insight really to be gained from it. It's like they definitely like had ideas kind of for the cat and Rimmer and Lister. They're just like, I don't know. he likes motorcycles and food and okay, it's very hedonistic, which that would probably be a part of it. But I was like, yeah, I didn't really learn anything from that about Lister. Like, you could tell they were definitely like Rimmer focused.
Mhm.
And I think that the other issue is, that makes me laugh about this episode, is I was like, oh, it's better than life, sir. Oh yes, it's paradise, and it is the most Britishy, drab, gray beach you will ever see in your entire life, and a golf course that is also drab. Like, if you want a sample, I've been to England. If you want a sample of what it's like there, watch this episode and just go, does that look like paradise to you? Like, that is Britain. Just gray, steel gray. When you think it's the grayest sky you've ever seen in your life, the next day it's grayer. And it's so funny because, like, apparently, like, I think to cut on the budget, they just filmed in England, and it was like such a massive mistake. And I guess, like, behind the scenes, apparently, Craig Charles and Danny John Jules, they were all complaining that, like, this is going to look terrible. How is this supposed
and
to
I
be
think it was
good?
like freezing cold too, and I did listen to the commentary, although, like, most of the commentary, it didn't really offer a ton of insights. But I did catch that, they talk about Craig Charles couldn't actually get the motorcycle going. He kept stalling out, and so whenever the motorcycle runs off, that's actually a stunt person because he couldn't he couldn't actually get the motorcycle to work.
No, that is, God, that is so funny. Yeah, no, and like, they were freezing. They moved it to a golf course because I think they were freezing in a certain scene. So they decided to move it to a golf course so that they could wear golfing outfits. And even then, it's like, I guess they said, like, there's no, the Craig Charles, like, there's no sun. What are we going to do? And I guess the director or something was like, it's okay, we'll add the sun in post. And then they never did. Because they didn't have that technology back then. I heard that in one of the remastered versions, which I haven't seen all of, that they did do that, which is funny. Because it's still
there's
not
like the
make it
back
look
and
like
forth.
paradise.
Yeah, there's the back and forth at the end, and they talk about how they shot his scene at night, and they did light. He said that they did lighten it up, but it looks like night and day whenever whenever they're showing Rimmer and all his 7 kids, and then they cut back to Lister and the cat, and it's like so much darker.
And it's like, even if you added sun to that golf course, I'm like, it still looks like a golf course I would find anywhere in the suburbs in Chicago. It's like, this is not paradise. So that, I think that aspect may be the biggest weakness in that. Like, I think some of it was the limitations where it's like, if you want to show the hedonism of Lister, you really need paradise then. Particularly with the cat and Lister, I'm like, okay, this really should look like it should look like Fiji is what it should be, because that was his idea of paradise. I'm like, none of this looks like Fiji.
And instead Rimmer's the one that has the most hedonistic fantasy, imagining Magruder, and he has it is kind of funny that this is 1988 and they do understand what most people would actually do if a total immersion video game was real, and Rimmer immediately goes to sex.
Twice in one lifetime?
I'm practically Hugh Hefner.
I love just the callback to Magruder. She was the ship's boxing champion. The funny thing is, like, based on the descriptions of, like, in season 1 or whatever, they talk about Yvonne Magruder. I was surprised because I'm just like, she's pretty smoking hot. Like, I was just like, yeah, like, I kind of thought she would look like one of those, like, East German athletes or something. East German wrestler.
Or going back to my last season, Alexa from 50 First Dates.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. But no, I like, I will say the one thing that does save the Lister section is, the one thing I do enjoy is that Rimmer's fantasies are, like, there's definitely the aspect of, like, I get to bonk Yvonne Magruder and stuff, but so much of it is, like, super serious. Like, oh, I'm being worshipped by all these, military bigwigs, and I have the kid who says, oh, I'll be the envy of the academy, like getting his autograph.
And he does the perfect Rimmer salute too whenever he pops up.
Yeah, there's like a stuffiness to his, whereas Lister's, there's no baggage to unravel with Lister's. It's just pure, just like, I'm here to have fun. And the cat, more or less, because he's such a vain, selfish creature, it's the same thing. Whereas Rimmer's almost immediately goes south. Like, what I love is, like, from the beginning, it plants those seeds that it's not going to work out for Rimmer right when he imagines the car, and it's like this, it's like this gremlin, it's like Yugo or something. And then even when he's telling the story, it's like, oh, I can't remember what I said, but it really got to him, and it cuts to the guys there at the table, and they all look at each other like, what the lion? And they're just like, like fake laughing. And I'm like, that's the hint that it's not working right, because in a real fantasy, they wouldn't have given each other those looks. They just would have straight up just said, ha ha ha, because everything he says is perfect. And that to me is where his brain's creeping in, like implanting those little seeds, like it's not quite accepting this. And then like it's starting to fall apart. It's falling apart at the seeds. And then as it goes further and further, it just starts ripping to shreds.
Mm-hmm. And I do also like, I always found it weird because that, I don't know, I'm not a drinker, but part of Lister's fantasy where he gets the Dom Perignon in a pint glass and then he downs it and then puts the empty glass on top of his hat.
Good vintage. I like that. The funny thing is I've never quite understood I guess maybe it's a college mentality, like chug, but the just letting the beer just spill all over you. Never quite understood that, because they do that in like backwards, which I guess Lister, I'm just like, well, he's a slob, but they're in a bar, and I guess it is a little more of a dive bar, but like the lady doing that in the dive bar and backwards, when they reverse the footage, and I'm just like, why is she like, and then the way she ate that eclair too, I'm like, Jesus Christ, woman.
I do love, I'm kind of not, I guess I understand it, but to me, the golf course is kind of a low point in this episode.
Absolutely.
It's just kind of there with the cat calling the ball an egg and then him throwing the club instead of hitting it. But it's pretty brief, and then we get Rimmer with the 7 kids and the pregnant Magruder.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about the golf scene is and I realized it was a last second addition because they couldn't film in the freezing cold. They need to have their clothes on and everything. But, like, it is so just doesn't seem to me that's something Lister would do. Or even the cat. Because the cat, when would the cat wear golf clothes? Anything you know about the cat, it's just like he wants to be fashionable. And golf is about as unfashionable as it gets. So, like, this is, like, Lister's a guy who, like, ranted in the later season. It's like, like, I hit the ultimate low. I went to a wine bar. You went to a wine bar? Keep it down. I'm like, this is a guy who wouldn't go to a wine bar. And, like, he's golfing now? I'm like, yeah, this makes no sense. You could just tell that the writers just had to think of something quick. And there's, there probably was a golf course near where they were filming. And I was like, let's just do this.
But I do love the subtle progression that happens because... I have it playing now, and as soon as the kids come out, they're all just wearing like the sailor suits, and then they cut to Rimmer, and he's still looking normal, and throughout the entire scene in this episode, like once he gets into the Better Than Life, he doesn't have the H on his forehead because, in Better Than Life, he's not a hologram. He's solid. He's there.
Yeah.
And then they cut to him, and then he has the 5 o'clock shadow. And then they cut back to the kids, and then the kids now all have H's on their foreheads, which they didn't in the last scene whenever Magruder says, "Arnold, where are the nappy sacks?" Which
Where are the nappy sacks? Help!
which every parent knows that feeling. And then it cuts back to Rimmer, and now he has the H on his forehead, and his 5 o'clock shadow's gotten darker, and then he's got the alcohol in the paper bag. He looks more hopeless, and they blackened a couple of his teeth. I just love just that such quick, and I mean the Rimmer part of it is obvious, but like some of the other stuff is a bit more subtle. I didn't even notice that the fact that the kids go from being normal, and then later on having the H's on their foreheads.
I never noticed that till years later. Like, I was watching it like a few years ago, I think, which means I've been watching it for nearly 20 years and never noticed that. And I love there's a couple different things that ties into that really makes it work and why it's brilliant. One, the H is the ultimate symbol of Rimmer's failure. It is basically gazpacho soup in letter form. It's nothing reminds him of his abject failure like the fact that he is a hologram and that H stamped on his forehead. So the fact that all the kids have H's, it seems like it's like one of those fun little hints that it's just perpetuating this, long string of failure. The circle will continue. The other thing is, by slowly adding the H's, it takes you into that realm of like what's real and what's not, because we know at the end they think they're out of the game, and he's got the H on his forehead. So it's already kind of giving you that unease of like you're not quite sure. And I think it makes that scene a little more fun. Like, oh, we're still in the game, like, because it's already told you that the game can put the H on people. Mm-hmm. So it's a fun little kind of like foreshadowing, I think, to that. But no, that scene is so brilliant because nothing I have ever seen in anything, sci-fi or otherwise, has so captured the neurotic personality than that concept of my brain will not accept good things happening to me. So it is literally taking my fantasy, going, this can't be right, and now torturing me, turning the fantasy against me. And I just know so many people with like anxiety issues and all sorts of neuroses and stuff. I just see that all the time. Like when good things happen to them, they're just like, no, it's not right. I can't take this. Like something bad's going to go wrong.
I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. I do it myself. And I thought that was like and that is the best insight in this entire episode. That the other two are, at least in their selfishness and in their hedonism, are just adjusted enough. They are simple people with simple tastes. Rimmer is too complex, too neurotic. His brain won't take it, won't accept the fact that good things happen to him, and then just completely backfires on him.
And it goes from 0 to 100 real quick, too. Which,
yeah.
I mean, it has to, because they only have 30 minutes, and they only introduced this game 15 minutes into the episode, so they kind of have to do it real quick. But I also love the tax man. Like he's played by Ron Pember, but he's so great, and just especially his little eye twitch whenever he's talking about, if you don't pay, I'll break your legs and take your thumbs.
Let's see those little thummies crack. That crack at the end every time I wince when it does that cut. No, he was great, and what a great callback to the earlier joke, because that joke is also amazing. I've used that multiple times with the IRS. Just like 3 million years in deep space, all of humanity dead. That doesn't matter to these people. They'll find a way to collect. Yeah. The idea that the British IRS is going to come all the way out there.
Oh, and I just realized that this is the first time that they go for the unseen spider crawling up the trouser leg, which they refer to it, but it's completely off camera, and then they do the same thing with the Crichton's hand with the eyeball.
That's right. They refer to it. Okay, they refer to it off camera. Yeah. No, God, that scene was amazing. There's a spider making a nest in my joy department.
And then especially, like, I love the scene. It's so fantastic. Like the kind of red burn-in cut to them all buried in the sand. Holly as well. I think that's so great with Holly as his monitor.
Can't take him anywhere, can you? no, that was brilliant. Like, it's so funny. The weird thing about this episode is, to me, it says so much. Like, there's a handful of episodes that say a lot. A lot of episodes are just jokes, but there's a very small few that, like, they remind me of the Bender episode in Futurama where he has all the people growing on him and he's floating through space. I thought that was like, that one won an Emmy, and I thought it was a brilliant episode, said a lot. And then there's a lot of episodes of Futurama where it's just like, it's just a bunch of jokes. But this one and another few handful just say so much. And yet this one, even though it says so much, still feels like there's filler moments. We get the golf course. So it's like they managed to cram so much in to 30 minutes while also still having a couple moments that were padded, which is not awful. It's just so funny to me that I'm like, boy, it's like they managed to cram a bunch in while wasting a couple minutes.
Yeah.
So good on them.
And then kind of the last thing that we skipped over a little bit in the fake out ending is the opening the letter that said that Rimmer actually passed his astronavigation exam and he's been promoted.
Who says nothing good ever happens to you? Smeg in hell. Yeah, no, and again, that's his. But the beauty of it is, that is his fantasy come to life, and then his brain's like, nope, bring in the tax guy.
Yeah, and he comes out of the locker, too. The locker with the Marilyn Monroe photos pasted on the side, too.
For some reason, I love Lister's reaction there, too. Just so, Smeg was still in the game!
And I do love that this episode does end on the hammer smash. Like, it doesn't, we don't get a moment of them out of the game. Like, it ends with them still in the game. Oh, and I just noticed too, and like, I think it has showed up earlier in this series, but I kind of forgot about it. But I love that they have the coffee mug that has the H on it as well in that scene.
Oh, yeah. There was a theory for a while. I don't know if it's changed in recent years with the later seasons, but at least through season 6, there was a theory that they never escaped the game, that Rimmer's neuroses crafted a universe that seemed real enough where bad things can happen to them, and they've just been trapped in the game the whole time. Which I thought was an amusing theory. My problem is, like, good things do end up happening to Rimmer eventually. Like, I know in season 7, you've got him running off and becoming Ace Rimmer or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, this gets a little too complicated. But for a while there, I'm just like, yeah, no, I can see this. Like, you could argue they're still in the game.
Yeah, one other theory that I heard, which I really love, especially in the early series, is that that this entire first couple series, like Holly bringing back Rimmer, it's just because Holly has gone senile, and like he's doing this just to mess with Lister for his own amusement. Like that.
Oh, absolutely. That's canon as far as I'm concerned. That is exactly why he did it.
And it's not that he was the best person to keep him sane. It's just because it's him having a laugh.
Yeah. No, and that's my view of Holly, and that's my favorite view. Just like the computer's like nice enough, but that there is a side that's just like, we saw it with the practical joke. We've seen it with other things, or it's just like, you know what, I'm bored. Time to mess with the mice in the maze. Dance puppets dance.
Yeah, he's had 3 million years with just him and the scutters and the vending machines.
But at least when it's all said and done, they know they're 3 million miles away from the nearest Bernie Inn.
All right, well, I think that wraps up this episode. Do you have anything else to say about this episode or Red Dwarf in general before we get going?
The only thing I will add is I'd say go read the book, Better Than Life. It expands on everything this episode does, way more psychological, and it's just a total blast. So
yeah, I mean I don't give myself much time for reading but it's on my giant to-do list now. I would like to get that and check it out, but I don't know if it'll ever happen.
Or do the audiobook. It's read by Chris Berry, and he's doing an impression
yeah.
of everybody in it because he's a pretty decent impressionist.
Oh yeah, I did hear about that. That would be something more that I would be able to do, because I am able to listen to a bunch of stuff at work. So maybe that
now,
would be something I would look into.
I'm always about paying for things, so make sure you get a legitimate real copy. But if you happen to find it on YouTube, I'm not saying it's there, but do what you want. But obviously get a real copy.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It has been a fantastic conversation. And for people who might not be aware of you and your work, why don't you take a moment and let people know where else you can be found online?
You can see us on YouTube under Channel Awesome. My brother and I do a show called The Nostalgia Critic, and I'm just one of the behind-the-scenes monkeys, basically doing bit work. But he's the main star, and we review a bunch of older movies and more recent movies. It's just jokey, silly reviews, and that's it. It's not that interesting.
Yeah, I've been a fan for a while. His
my condolences.
Of what was it? The Hulk Hogan one. I was frozen today.
Christ! I was frozen today.
That lives rent free in my head.
No, and I will say, the other thing I appreciate about Red Dwarf is it's written by a Rob and Doug, and my brother's name is Doug, so there you go.
All right, and as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me everywhere on social media where I'm at Bubbawheat. These days, I'm most active. At the moment, I'm most active on Threads, occasionally Instagram, but I do still have all the other ones, so if you message me, I will still get the notification, and as long as you say something nice, I will most likely reply to you. And you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on all the available podcatchers out there. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that and discuss episodes as they come out. You can also have discussion about other time loop movies, TV shows, video games. It's all welcome there. Share memes. We'd love to have you and get some more interaction going there. And we'd love it if you enjoy the show to take a moment and leave us a 5-star review on however you listen, whatever podcatcher you're using, and if they allow the written review, to do that as well, because that helps bump us up in the search algorithms to help more people find us, and we'd love to get out to more listeners. And until next time, smoke me a kipper. I'll regenerate before breakfast next week.
Stoke me a clipper.